The remarkable burial site of China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huang, has been a wonder to archaeologists since its discovery. The phenomenal terracotta army surrounding it is the first of its kind, a true hidden treasure. However, scientists have uncovered new secrets about this ancient emperor and his magnificent grave army, things that no one would have ever imagined. This massive ground, with its thousands of detailed figures, is indescribable. But what new secrets have been uncovered about China's first emperor and his legion of terracottas? How does this new information impact our view of ancient Chinese people and the world at large? Join us in this video as scientists finally open the tomb of China's first emperor, sealed for thousands of years. Qin Shi Huang was the first emperor of China, and the legend of this ancient ruler is one of awe and wonder. It all dates back to around 246 BC. Back then, China as we know it today didn't exist. Instead, there were 7 small kingdoms in the region, each with its own king and army. These kingdoms often fought each other in epic clashes for supremacy. In one of these kingdoms, named Qin, a young king was set to ascend the throne at just 13 years of age. 13 years may seem like an early age to rule, but in those times, it was unpredictable how long a king would live. Some kings died before 40, so it was typical for the next ruler to assume the throne as soon as possible. When the boy King Qin ascended the throne at 13 years old, everyone probably thought he would end up like his predecessors. No one imagined that he would do something no king had ever done. No one imagined he would become the first emperor. Qin had an advisor named Lu Buwei and a loyal general named Wang Jian. With their help, he was able to crush all his rivals in a series of intense wars. He then unified the 7 kingdoms under his command, forming the Qin Empire, which later became modern-day China. By 221 BC, Emperor Qin had become the most powerful man in the world at the time, earning the title of China's first emperor. For Emperor Qin, keeping the other kingdoms under control required a combination of diplomacy, deception, and brute force. Han was the first state to fall under his rule, followed by Zhao, Wei, Shu, Yan, and Qi. However, this emperor's ambition was much greater than simply unifying China. He wanted to make his empire as glorious as possible so that his name would be etched in history forever. He launched numerous projects to improve the administration, culture, and economy of his empire. These included building roads, canals, and, most famously, the Great Wall of China. He also standardized the writing system and currency of the Qin dynasty. To demonstrate his love for conquest, Emperor Qin frequently sent his servants on expeditions to explore and map out lands beyond China. However, it was clear that he wished not only to explore but also to conquer more territories. Many believe that this insatiable desire for power is what drove him to seek something no other emperor had ever sought: immortality. One thing history does not fail to remind us about Emperor Qin Shi Huang is that he was obsessed with becoming immortal. The truth is that ancient China was a land of constant wars and chaos. Kings could be betrayed, defeated, overthrown, or even assassinated. Seeing how powerful he had become and how much more land he still wanted to conquer, the emperor became determined to find a way to preserve his reign forever. Thus, the search for the elixir of immortality began. Qin Shi Huang spent outrageous sums of money and resources funding envoys to seek out a secret potion or substance that could grant him eternal life. It was as though the young emperor knew he wouldn't live very long. After all, he reigned only from 221 to 210 BC. He died during one of his tours of inspection. But before his demise, he left behind something phenomenal, what would become one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time. He built a phenomenal structure at his burial site, an impressive mausoleum that stayed hidden for over 2,000 years. This imperial legacy was actually uncovered in 1974. The discovery was never premeditated. Local farmers were simply excavating a water well when they encountered some of the crafted structures of the tomb. The initial discoverer was a local farmer named Ng. After he and a few of his colleagues saw several terracotta figures, they reported the discovery to the local authorities. These men had no idea of the significance or value of what they had found. In fact, they never knew that what they had uncovered would become what we now know as the Terracotta Army. The Terracotta Army is an army of human-sized soldiers buried beside the Qin Emperor. The entire army was found underground by archaeologists after the initial findings of the local farmers. Today, it is one of the most extraordinary discoveries ever made. The discovery almost single-handedly transformed the Chinese economy, bringing significant revenue from tourists and scholars who came to examine the terracotta army. 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, 520 horses, and 150 cavalry horses, that's the sheer size of the terracotta army. Every figure was positioned according to rank, taking its rightful place as it would in a typical battle formation. One interesting thing about this army is that no two figures look alike. Some have beards, some do not. Some are fat, some aren't. The hairstyles and facial features are also unique for all the soldiers. Some are crafted in a specific design or type of armor, depicting their rank. The level of attention to detail in the terracotta army is just superb, and it gets even more fascinating when you consider that these figures were crafted over 2,000 years ago, yet they display such a high level of excellence in artistry. How they managed to stay preserved until today is another mystery. Surely, you can imagine how many resources it took to build something like this at the time. This phenomenal work of art just goes to show how rich and powerful the Qin dynasty was. In 1987, the Qin Mausoleum and the Terracotta Army were officially labeled a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Ever since it came into the limelight, experts and scholars have been working hard to try and determine how the ancient Chinese people were able to accomplish such a feat. The level of artistry depicted in the Terracotta Army is just mind-boggling. Everything was made to look realistic, from the armor to the weapons and facial features. Bear in mind that we are talking about 210 BC here. Back then, technology wasn't as sophisticated as it is now, so the level of skill it took to create something like this must have been out of this world. It is believed that the soldiers were crafted in some sort of assembly line, with different craftsmen specializing in specific body parts. After assembling, each statue was then reworked to add unique features like facial expressions and other fine details. There must have been special units that crafted the weapons these soldiers wielded, as research has shown that the weapons were crafted with accuracy and precision, just like the soldiers themselves. The Terracotta Army soldiers wield weapons like swords, spears, arrows, and crossbows. These weapons were so well made that some of them have stayed sharp and strong despite the fact that over 2 millennia have passed. Experts have found that most of these weapons had a layer of chrome plating, which further ensured their longevity. But then, you may wonder, why would an emperor pour in tons of money, skill, and resources to build an army of lifeless clay men and horses? What purpose did the Terracotta Army really serve? Well, it all boils down to the ancient traditions that prevailed during that time. Every king who ruled a dynasty was entitled to a befitting tomb. It wasn't uncommon to find kings making artifacts and all sorts of structures at their burial sites. So imagine what would be done for one who wasn't just a king but an emperor, the first of his kind. Surely, he deserved a befitting burial site. The tomb builders picked a site about 89 kilometers from the palace on the slopes of a mountain called Lishan. Initially, no one would have thought that this tomb would turn out to be one of the greatest tombs ever built. But as the legend of China's first emperor unfolded, no one could deny that he needed a burial site worth remembering for ages. It wasn't just a tomb, it was a monument to the most powerful man in history. This is what prompted the creation of a spectacular burial site. According to ancient records, the tomb of China's first emperor measured up to 115 meters high and boasted a chamber about 80 meters by 50 meters in dimension. It was surrounded by a stone wall 15 meters long and 125 meters wide. Something like this took many years to build, which is why some theorists suggest that the emperor must have begun building his mausoleum not long after he ascended the throne. Archaeological experts estimate that Emperor Qin's tomb must have stretched up to about 500 meters on each side of its base, making it much bigger than the famous Egyptian pyramids. However, 2 millennia of wind and rain must have eroded the tomb's massive base. According to ancient accounts, the architects and engineers went the extra mile to recreate the emperor's palace inside the burial chamber, ensuring that even the tiniest details, like the rivers flowing through the kingdom, were represented. It was as though they planned for the emperor to rule in eternity, just as he did on earth. However, what the ancient accounts failed to mention was the magnificent army hidden away in 3 pits at one corner of the tomb. Archaeologists who investigated the pits confessed that they had never seen such complex and splendid ancient terracotta sculptures. But besides the terracotta army, there was one other shocking thing about this tomb. You see, kings of ancient China were obsessed with the afterlife. It wasn't unusual for 1 or 2 human lives to be sacrificed in the king's burial. Such people were meant to serve the king on his journey to the afterlife, at least, that's what they believed at the time. And so, when it came to the burial of the first emperor of China, it was decided that the emperor deserved more than the usual number of women. It is believed that at least 100 were killed and buried alongside him. According to ancient records, among these women were all of his childless concubines, sacrificed to serve their lord in eternity. Although there is no way to verify if these records are true, it would seem that it was the king's desire to get maximum comfort and pleasure in the afterlife, just as he did while alive. But concubines weren't the only sacrifices made to satisfy the ancient king's afterlife needs and desires. Building this massive tomb and the magnificent terracotta army necessitated the use of thousands of human laborers. Historians believe that the emperor acquired the biggest labor force in the history of China for his grand project, and they were all cheap labor. In other words, it's likely that these workers weren't paid but were instead forced to work under harsh conditions. Emperor Qin brought a great deal of oppression to the people of China and was much feared and hated by many. Some scholars believe that this emperor recruited over 700,000 people to build his mausoleum, but it didn't end there. Proponents of this theory also believe that these workers were later killed so they wouldn't reveal the secrets of the tomb. The Qin emperor's grave was like an underground kingdom, a testament to his power and splendor. Considering the fact that he had many enemies, he probably didn't want anything or anyone to interfere with his legacy. Moreover, there was the belief that the terracotta army would serve the critical purpose of protecting the emperor on his afterlife voyage. Destroying this army would mean doom for the emperor's soul, and so he did everything to keep his gravesite a secret, even going as far as committing genocide. Although historians and scholars agree that several lives were lost in the making of Emperor Qin's mausoleum, there is still some controversy over how many workers were actually killed. The number 700,000 seems like an exaggeration. Some scholars have theorized that there's no way the emperor could have killed that many people without causing an uprising or receiving some sort of backlash that would have been recorded in history. However, proponents of the genocide theory argue that the emperor may have executed the workers gradually.